Good morning, YouTube. Time for another update. I would like to explain a little bit as to how I've arrived at the conclusions I've arrived at and the information that I've been presented by the corrupt county officials here in Isabella County that have led me down this path. After the Sheriff's Department stole my family's home and its contents in 2010, we filed a civil suit because we couldn't get criminal charges on them, against them. They were unwilling to look at themselves criminally or give us a police report to reflect the criminality, so we had to handle this in civil court. And that's part of my frustration with our judiciary right now, that we don't have. We don't have a judicial system here in Michigan. It's not against the state anyway. The state commits crimes against the people, and the people are left with filing civil complaints against the state. So anyways, I launched this civil lawsuit after interviewing well over 200 different lawyers and law firms. And some of them said that they would represent us, with monthly commitments of $25,000 a month, and that just wasn't an option. The suit was prepared by myself. I did all the legal research. I found all the case sites. I found all the crimes that I could call out by name and by code, and formulated this lawsuit and filed it locally in the Isabella County courts. And the answers we got back from Shelley Sweet read like a confession. We thought she was a civilian at the time, because the state didn't want us to know that Shelley Sweet was actually an employee of the Sheriff's Department, like her friend Clinton Steiner, that carried out this fake eviction. And it wasn't until we served the suit on Shelley Sweet at her last known address, which was Robert Wheeler's address. Robert Wheeler wrote on the envelope, "She doesn't live here, deliver it to her at work at the Sheriff's Department and put it back in the mail." Well, the U.S. Postal Service didn't take it to Shelley Sweet at the Sheriff's Department. They gave it back to me. So that was our first indicator, and the suit was filed a year after September 27th, 2010, so it would have been September 28th, 2011. So it was right after that we found out that Shelley Sweet was actually a state actor too, and that it kind of changed the whole dynamic of that picture. We originally thought that Shelley Sweet and Clinton Steiner were sleeping together or had some sort of personal arrangement that would somehow allow all this to happen. There was definitely a bias there that allowed law enforcement to execute this fake eviction against my family, created by Bruce Havens, a Mount Pleasant lawyer, created and drafted. And check out my YouTube, a picture of Shelley Sweet talking about Bruce Havens. He's a Mount Pleasant lawyer that drafted and filed a fake eviction, essentially, in the federal court. And it didn't mean anything locally. It didn't give any time to object. It was just it was an attempt to produce a paper that looked like an eviction paper from the county court. So anyways, the suit was filed, and it went for about 2.5 years before Paul Chamberlain threw it out. Paul Chamberlain, right there at the end, threatened me with sanctions for filing frivolous motions, and said that he'd dismiss the case if we're unable to pay the sanction he was about to levy against us for filing motions. And the motion that I filed was a motion for him to take judicial notice of the crimes reported in this lawsuit against the county, and to do something about it. As a judicial officer, Paul Chamberlain was required to recognize that the actions taking place against myself and my family were criminal, and that he had a duty and an obligation to call for an indictment, to call for a criminal grand jury, a criminal grand jury indictment against his county cronies. Well, this was the motion that he threatened us with sanctions for. So the motion was ultimately withdrawn, but it is part of the case file, which is being scanned and it'll be uploaded here shortly. So, like I said, the case lasted 2.5 years. If I'd have known then what I know now, I would have moved for summary disposition almost immediately, because they provided no defense. They answered the complaint without any proof to the contrary of my allegations. So now we're sitting here with, this motion to dismiss by the defendants was entered and to defray attention from the fact that it should have never been dismissed in the first place. And Robert Wheeler, we'd already earned a default against him for failing to answer the amended complaint. The judge heard Robert Wheeler's motion to set aside his default and to dismiss him from the case. At the same time, Chamberlain heard the arguments from the county defendants to dismiss themselves from the case. And the hearing went pretty good, I thought. They were tripping on their tongues, and there was lawyers in the crowd, in the audience, saying there's no way in hell that this is going to be dismissed, and that we'd won. They felt that we had won our opposition to their motion to dismiss. That was according to the lawyers that were there in the audience. They said we had a pretty ironclad defense against their motion to dismiss themselves. But anyways, the judge, Paul Chamberlain, did not decide the motion then. He took like 5 months just to kind of let things settle down, and then he dismissed everybody. He granted Robert Wheeler's motion to set aside his default and dismiss him from the action against him, because Paul Chamberlain knew that if we got a default against Robert Wheeler would then become our primary witness against the state. So that's what had to be done from their perspective. You can't have one defendant on the state side found guilty without creating more troubles for the state than they ever had previous. So, like I said, Robert Wheeler was brought back into the case after we'd earned a default, and the default against him was set aside, and he was summarily dismissed from the case, even though it wasn't even part of his defenses. So then we appealed. Okay, we scraped up the money for an appeal, and I wrote an excellent brief, and we submitted our appeal to the Michigan Appellate Court. Now, these are actual things that have happened to me that I'm trying to get out there to explain the fact that we do not have a judiciary here in Michigan at all. So I write this appeal, and I accompany it with an appeal brief. And I get this letter from the Michigan Appellate Court saying they don't like my brief. Well, inside the brief, I argued that I am a pro per plaintiff, and that I am not required to conform to all of the nuances required of attorneys in the appellate format, and so on and so forth. I could have submitted my appeal on a paper napkin, and they would have had to take it. I'm not a lawyer, and they can't hold me to lawyer standards. Well, that was their argument. I get this letter back saying that the Michigan Appellate Court didn't like my brief. And I sent them another document full of case law citing the fact that I don't need to produce legal documents that conform to any standards required of lawyers. And that didn't work. They sent me another letter saying they struck my brief. So, I saw the writing on the wall there too. There was nothing I could do in that system to accommodate this one judge that had some sort of inside feelings for what was going on here in Isabella County and trying to protect Isabella County by getting rid of our appeal. So anyways, the Michigan Appellate Court, they struck my brief on their own. They just struck it. 64 pages. And then they dismissed my appeal based on the fact that it was not accompanied by a brief. Where's the legalities with this? Okay? Folks, you know, ask Mark Baker what it's like to use this system to defend yourself. Ask Mark Baker how many dollars he spent. Mark Baker, Baker's Green Acres up north here in Michigan, when the Michigan Attorney General, his office and the DNR came after him for him having allegedly feral hogs. Okay, ask Mark Baker how this financially impacted him to participate in this BS system called our judicial system here in Michigan. Ask Cliven Bundy, okay, if he's ever been compensated for the legal expenses that it cost him to be the same as he was before the BLM came after him. Part of the destruction of this country is coming from forcing us to participate in a system that doesn't work and cost us everything we have. Anyways, it's important that people recognize that the loss of our judiciary means something to everybody, okay? The fact that we can't participate in courts anymore without the expectation of being financially drained and defeated, no matter how good of arguments we make. It's an attempt to extort from us, to take from us our hard-earned money and everything else, essentially, to defeat us, and then offer us no justice. I can't even imagine how much money Mark Baker is out. And in the end, in his case, the actions against him were ruled unconstitutional. And Mark Baker took his life savings and threw it at this. He got help. He's gotten support from around the country. That went to feed the lawyers. Lawyers make out like bandits in every situation. Mark Baker, a retired Air Force man, honorably discharged, sitting on his farm up north, is attacked by our state government, forced to spend his life savings defending himself. And even though he wins, he lost. Are you starting to understand here what's going on and the reason that this type of stance needs to be taken by every American? Look, if you're not an American, I get it. Don't pay attention to this story or Mark Baker's story or Cliven Bundy's story. Just forget it, okay? If you're American, you have to understand how important it is that we have a judiciary here. That we have a justice system that's not just arbitrary and capriciously making these decisions and ruining families' lives here in Michigan and across this country. Everything, every interaction that I've ever had with my local government, my state government, my federal government is being scanned right now. You know, this is a hard story to understand. Unless you've been involved with this bullshit that's been going on, you don't know. I didn't know. I was clueless. I spent 24 years of my life staying out of court. That was the #1 mission statement. Bullet point on my mission statement as a general contractor: stay out of court. I've left money on the table to stay out of court in a dispute with homeowners, which were few and far between. If there's going to be winners and losers, let it be the men and women of this country, okay? When we take our disputes to court anymore, we're all losers. And the only winners are those oppressing us. The crooked lawyers, the crooked bankers, the crooked judges.